Hello and welcome to the May 7th, 2019 edition of our Homeschooling Help. And I am joined by my good friend and colleague across the country, Nancy Wilk.
Good morning, Andrea. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. And for those who were with us last time, we ended up with some technical difficulties. Some were self-imposed user error. Some were, I just don't know what. So I'm praying that we don't have that situation. But Nancy, just explain to the viewers about your train.
Yeah, well, if you've watched the show before, you probably know that we are right beside a railroad track, and we get lots of trains. And unfortunately, last week there was a train accident. So consequently, there was no traffic for a little while, but the traffic is picked up on the train, and they are very heavy on the horn. So they have been a lot of trains this morning, a lot of heavy trains on the horn. So if I raise my thumb, Andrea, that means there's a train coming. I can hear the bells. So you just mute me so that you guys don't have to listen to this obnoxious train horn.
Right, and then she'll put her thumb up again. And hopefully it won't be in the middle of a tremendously important point that she's trying to make, but this is live broadcasting, and so we just all have to deal with it. But today we are talking about volunteering. And
Okay. Well, I cannot see Andrea, so I don't know if she's talking or not, but she'll be back in just a minute.
okay, so this is what happens. I don't know why I'm being knocked off, but if I see myself go, I'll fix it. Anyway, so we're talking about volunteering and why volunteering is important. And it's important for a number of reasons. Number one, people need to make good use of their time all around. And sometimes people will, especially in a homeschool setting, they'll be dealing with family issues, things they have to do around the house, family responsibilities. Then, of course, there'll be the academics. There'll be church. There might be extracurricular activities. There will be interactions with families. But if we don't start teaching our children from a very young age that there are matters, people, concerns, real needs that exist in various places, and we don't encourage them to participate as a volunteer. And you might say, well, how is a 5-year-old going to volunteer? Well, we can get into that. There's plenty of ways that a 5-year-old can volunteer. And as they get older, the point being is that we can tithe our time as well as tithing our money. And by looking at it from that point of view, it should be something that you say, okay, what are we doing as a family in a volunteer capacity that serves people who more often than not will never be able to pay us back?
You just said tithing our time. That's something that a lot of people might not have ever considered before. It's easy to think about tithing our money, but tithing our time, how do you do that? You know, how much time might you choose to tithe?
Well, I guess I'm using that term loosely in as much as the Bible doesn't say you must tithe your time, but especially for those who do not have an increase. Your 8-year-old doesn't have an increase. If you are, in a situation where you're not bringing in an income, it's not like you don't have things to offer to the Lord. And so I like to talk about it in terms of tithing our time, because the tithe is God's tax, and it's a representation that everything belongs to God, and that tithe is that tax. And so if we look at it from that point of view, we're teaching our children, and maybe having to teach ourselves, how to partition our time so that it's not just about getting by. So it's not just about building up our bank account. We're supposed to seek the kingdom of God, and then he gives us everything else. Well, part of that is saying, how much of my week, and a week is a good way to look at it, or, a day, but I think a week, because you can select a day that you're going to do something, that it becomes an opportunity to give where you don't expect to get back.
Right. Okay. I see that. Very good.
So, for example, what can children do that they're uniquely qualified for? Well, they're uniquely qualified usually to make people smile. They're fun to be around. And so over the years, not only did I bring my own children, but when I was running our homeschool choir, part of our volunteer would be showing up at places, whether they were retirement homes or convalescent hospitals. Occasionally, we would go to the Ronald McDonald House at the local hospital and basically minister to people whose children were, in the throes of cancer treatment. And invariably, when you do something like this, where you have no expectation and it's really understandable that these people aren't going to be able to give back, you get to see the benefit in giving. And so it's just as much as your imagination will allow you to do. You know what's existing in your area, whether it's a group of veterans, a group of seniors, if it's somebody, let's say, who can't take care of their property anymore and they're elderly. Going in and saying, look, I would like to volunteer and help you. And a lot of people at first are going to be maybe suspicious. Why would you do that? Right. And then it's an opportunity to share the gospel while you're doing it.
I see. Very good. So yeah, there are things that little kids can do. And then, of course, as our children grow, those opportunities might be a little more complex and a little bit more independent, moving towards the type of things they are particularly interested in learning how to do.
Exactly. And let me just go back to, you say independently. Well, as families, it's great for families to pursue a day of the week, a couple of days a month, depending on how they do it, where they all go and do things. So I use the example of going to the Ronald McDonald House. Well, past the time that I was running the choir, there were times that my daughter, who has a beautiful singing voice, and we had the little traveling, for lack of a better word, karaoke thing. And so where we would go is we'd go to the Ronald McDonald House. We would put in advance we would like, and we'd be there at dinner. My husband set up the machine. I was the one who introduced things. So as we all took what we were good at, nobody was going to want to hear us sing. But at Christmas, we handed out booklets and they sang Christmas carols with us. You can bring meals to people and then spend time with them. It isn't so much how glorious it sounds, it's whether or not you're giving of your time when it's obvious to the recipient that you could be doing something else. And that's a witness even in and of itself.
Right. It sure is. There's so much that can be done. So much. Like one of the things that my husband does when he just he might walk up to the post office and he'll always carry a trash bag with him and pick up trash along the way. It's volunteer. Nobody even knows it, until now. I just told everybody that he does it, but it's something that he does just as a volunteer thing because it needs to be done. The scripture tells us. Well, let's back up. You first started saying to seek first the kingdom of God. That scripture says, and his righteousness. That means doing the right thing. Whether somebody is the direct and conscious recipient of it or not, God knows if we're doing the right thing with our time before him. And too often sort of the default is if there's nothing really structured that we just default to entertaining ourselves. So this is a way that we can really be mindful of our stewardship obligations, whether somebody else is a direct recipient or not. It still recognizes that God has given us the time and that we need to be using it appropriately for his honor and glory and purpose.
Right. And I wouldn't be so sure nobody notices. We don't always know who's watching us, right? True. But once he's established it and it's something that he does, what's to say that you couldn't get families in the area to say, how about we spend this coming Saturday, and just picking up trash? We have a society that's saying, well, don't we pay our taxes for that? Well, first of all, you might pay your taxes for that. Doesn't always get done. Doesn't always get done well, right? And so I think I mentioned last week about a young boy somewhere that, starting to filling up potholes in his area. And we talked a little bit how nobody told him to do it, and he was providing a service. So having people be service oriented, then it's a lot less likely that people will be bored if families challenge themselves and their children to do something useful, find something productive to do. And it's usually, all you have to do is look at your neighborhood and find out, well, obviously, the trash gets picked up regularly. What if you went around and, said, can I help you take your trash cans out? Or I'll take your trash cans back in. You're meeting your neighbors. You're doing a lot of things, and it's being salt and light. And you know what? We all got to take these bushels off our heads. We have the light of Christ. Let's not be afraid to show it.
Yes, yes, yes. These are very practical matters, and a lot of times we fall short of representing the Lord well, because there's oftentimes the idea that our Christianity is just theoretical, or something that's going to happen after we die, and it's really not. It's very, very hands-on, involved in real things.
Exactly. So there's other things to think about. All right, let's say you have a young person now, a little bit older than someone who needs direct supervision all the time. And that young person thinks, I might want to become a vet. Well, a good thing to do is find volunteer opportunities working with animals. You could think, I'd like to be a vet, and you go work at a shelter and you can't stand the smell. Maybe that's not going to be what you do, but you won't know until you try. Maybe you think that you want to go into agriculture, and so you help somebody, there's, can I help you with your garden? Can I help you do whatever? And then you find out, I love this. This is something I could do. So volunteering not only gives you the opportunity to help where there's a need, but it also gives you some experience that says, is this something I would like to do?
Mm-hmm. That reminds me of a really cute story. My granddaughter wanted to help at a horse. There's a lady in town who has a thoroughbred racehorse retirement and rescue program. And my granddaughter wanted to volunteer. So she started doing that. And then there was an essay contest. Well, River wrote about, how important it was to, if you think you want a horse, to go to a barn first, because you might not know how bad it smells. Well, our friend had been in the horse industry and cleaning barns for 40 years, and it had long past her mind, had forgotten how barns might smell to the upon first entry. So how noticeable those things are when you're not accustomed to them. Another little story I have to share. This is really exciting for us. We had some young ladies, college age girls, that were visiting our town from Lynchburg. We were in Appomattox, and they were in town for the day, and they stopped in and saw our courtyard and saw our garden and our little signature wall, and engaged us in conversation. And as I began to tell them the story of what we were doing here, this one young girl was particularly interested, and she's a communication major. And what she noticed just by stopping and asking her question, just saying, hey, was how enthusiastic I got about telling her story. Well, that intrigued her. And she said, hey, if you ever need help, I want to help you tell that story. So, I believed her and followed up. And sure enough, she's going to be a volunteer intern here for a few hours a week during the summer. And as a communications journalism, I don't know exactly what her major is, but she's going to help me get our story written down. And that is something that we need. It's something that is going to help her practice in this vein. So she is volunteering to do something that she's really good at that we really need. And who knows how that's going to turn out. You know, we have event planning opportunities and things like that. So if she comes and contributes what she can, then we'll see, you know, how we work together, how, you know, how that works. And, you know, we'd love to keep.
Exactly. So there's another benefit from being volunteer oriented. First of all, this young lady had to have enough gumption to say, hey, so she was presenting herself, right?
Yeah.
Well, if we train our children to be willing to ask the question, I mean, the worst that can ever happen is somebody says, no, you can't volunteer here. And then you're the worse for wear. But let's say she doesn't continue with you. She's building a reference. She's building a resume. She's getting a skill set. And you may have someone that you mentor in the future who takes what she's done and does it where she is from originally, or ends up being a partner in whatever it is you do. So there, as like so many things, when you're doing something valuable, it has a lot of benefits and rewards. It's not the reason you should do it, but it's a blessing. Kind of like if you say, marriage isn't to make you happy. That's not why people get married, so they can be happy. But one of the byproducts of marriage is happiness. So it's important to realize what the purpose of an activity is. And then, especially starting from a young age, letting people know you have the ability to contribute. And too many people have thought that their life is school and being entertained.
Right. Or the idea that, well, there would probably be a lot of young people who would think, well, I'm still in school. I can't do anything yet. I have to wait till I'm professional or graduated or, you know, that kind of stuff. And it doesn't give them opportunity. That mindset doesn't give them opportunity to practice and develop these skills like you're talking about.
Right. I'm thinking of a time with my youngest. I mean, our family has always been in some aspect of pro-life, being against the killing of unborn children. And how do you let someone who's younger participate? Well, you can show up at a pro-life demonstration. You can be outside an abortion clinic. Those always didn't fit. Those particular things didn't always fit in, although sometimes they did. But every week when we were back and forth to golf practice, we had to pass the local pregnancy resource center. And so I brought her in and I said, is there something she could do? Well, guess what? When people donated clothes or returned clothes that had been donated, they said, we really need these washed. So this was a perfect thing to do. So we would take the clothes, we were on our way, we were passing, she would wash the clothes, she would dry the clothes, she would fold them. And then the next time we were going there, we would drop them off and she'd pick up a next bunch. Well, she got pretty good at doing laundry. She had already been doing her own laundry, but this was something different. She was doing this and she was reminded of, she was providing a service. And I think those are the kinds of opportunities. Figure out how your life is worked out, where you pass by, what's something you actually can do, and then incorporated it. And this became an incorporation. Now, it changed when that center moved to a different part of town and we couldn't do it that way. So we found other opportunities for her to be able to do things. And so, as I said, she would go sometimes and sing and entertain people, whether it was at fire stations or retirement homes. And you know what? These people were so delighted. And all it was is, we've got the opportunity and let's just fit it into our lives. And that's what we did.
Right. Right. Well, I know that sometimes there's the people might be afraid that the employer or the facility would say no, you know, and there might be reasons to say no, but I don't think that most people are going to do that. If you have demonstrated yourself in any capacity as trustworthy and responsible, and you know, like, they're going to say yes to to well-behaved children that are doing what they're supposed to be doing, especially when mom and dad are there to help, help do that. But there might be legitimately some times when people have to think about liability or an unattended,
Sure.
unaccompanied child. But, I remember like a food bank, there's always opportunity to volunteer at the food bank, and sometimes homeschool groups would do it together. So if you don't have you've been talking about doing it as families. There's also homeschool groups, church groups, and things like that. We'll do that together. And, when people donate to the food bank, sometimes it just comes in a big bunch. So you need to sort through and put all the tomatoes on the tomato shelf,
Right. Right. So it's a mindset. And like last week we said, starting a business, find a need and fill it. They're actually two sides of the same coin. Sometimes the idea you have isn't necessarily going to monetize into a business. Visiting people at a retirement home isn't necessarily going to turn into a business. However, as a volunteer, you might decide that you have a true love for geriatric patients, and geriatrics is something that you might decide, well, maybe I'll go into nursing or medicine and make that my area of emphasis. All of this is gaining experience to help you hear God's call. If we're going to say, God doesn't care about what I do with my life, then we've missed the point of Scripture, because there's nothing God doesn't care about. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So use these as opportunities to be able to hear them a little bit better and decide, oh, okay, I've got an interest in this. I have opportunity, and I actually have capability. So, we could do one of four things. We can donate our money. We can donate our time. We can donate our efforts, but then we can also donate what skills we have. And as you start putting all those together, then you see more realistically, oh, I was made for a purpose, a specific purpose that God has for me.
Right. There's a young man who actually comes here to clean, and technically he's a volunteer to us, but he's part of something called a workforce development. But he comes and cleans, and this gentleman, his name is Campbell, and he works for us we say he works for us. He actually, like I said, is a volunteer, but he comes and he cleans. And this gentleman is on the autism spectrum, and so has a disability. But the guy, he cleans. And we had. I remember when he first started, we were set up more as a market. And he would make sure all the Coke bottles, all the labels were going the same direction. He'd take them off and dust and put everything back in the right little order. So even folks that are limited in their ability, they can do something very, very well. Sure. So we enjoy having him, and so. Even children or young people and adults with disabilities, they can still do things.
So let's go on the flip side. If you have a business, if you have a need that you could have filled by someone you just pay to do it, why not seek out opportunities to give young people in your church, in your community, an opportunity to do the job? Maybe as a volunteer and saying, I need some help. Would you come and help me? And in the process, you're in a position to teach them how to do something. And, I used to do that with, they weren't exactly volunteers, but when you thought of how much I was paying them and how I could have gotten the job done a whole lot cheaper if I just hired someone, then I'd have to go back and say, I'd have to go back and say, you missed that part there in the backyard. You were supposed to mow the entire lawn. So we're setting up sort of ad hoc mentoring situations as well. And that's how people develop community. We're supposed to have community within the church, community within our neighborhoods, community with the groups and associations we're part of. And I think not only is that an opportunity for people to get to know each other better, but it's an opportunity to be a force for Christ, not only with what we say, but with what we do and how we do it excellently. Just because you're going to be a volunteer doesn't mean it has to be a slipshod job and it doesn't matter what you do. As a matter of fact, being all the more conscious of doing an excellent job is really important.
Right. Absolutely. How many times so disappointing is it that somebody says, "Oh, I can help you with that," and then what they really mean is, "Well, how much are you going to pay me?" Or they don't show up, or come after the job is almost done. So we really do need to do everything that whatever we put our hand to, paid or not, needs to be done to the glory of God in the best of our ability. Should be done with excellence. So this is a great way to teach the kids to do that and practice it ourselves.
Right. Whether you're getting paid for something, whether you're purchasing a service or some sort of thing that you need, we're supposed to do everything to the glory of God, which means I purchase things to the glory of God. I provide services to the glory of God. I interact with people who need help to the glory of God. And that's a force that is very unstoppable. If people are kingdom-minded and kingdom-oriented, then quite frankly, the encouragement that the gates of hell won't prevail against the Church of Jesus Christ, they won't, because there's nothing in the whole universe that competes with the purpose and the high calling of serving the kingdom of God.
Right. I really think it's very easy just to open your eyes and look around and see that there's always something that needs to be done. Even the littlest, can, after church, pick up the scraps of paper that need to be put in the trash, put the Bibles and the hymnals in proper order, pick up pencils that need to be sharpened. There's always something to be done. I know even in public restrooms, I have this. I just wipe the counters when I'm in there. It's like you need it. It needs to be done. It's an easy thing to do, just to be mindful to.
Right.
Just do the right thing as we go.
That's it. Oh, yeah. And I think it becomes easier and easier if you're looking out to do it. And I can say for myself, it's not that I don't ever waste time. I waste less time than I used to waste. But as soon as you go into entertainment mode, or I'm just going to sort of go blank in my head, I make a habit of looking around and saying, okay, what needs to be done in my own household? Okay, let's take care of that. And that's where, especially in families, that parents can encourage their children how to look around and see what's needed. And then as a result of that, they're building up this volunteer mindset, because they shouldn't have to be paid to clean their room. They shouldn't have to be paid to clean up the dishes, right? These are things that are part of being in a community, a family. And so all these things work together to have the process of becoming a mature adult who's kingdom-minded starts when they're young.
Right. And you'd be surprised. I mean, sometimes people think, oh, they're little, they're kids, they don't know, what can they do? But if you develop that mindset, I've actually had my grandkids fight over who gets to put the silverware away from, so they want to work. They really do. They want to work. They have energy, and it just needs to be properly directed and encouraged. So you would be surprised. I think people would be surprised what kids can actually do when they're given the proper direction and motivation and purpose for doing it.
Yeah. And just to kind of close this out, and we somehow managed to escape too many technical difficulties or a train coming by.
Yeah. How about that?
We're made to work. Work is not a curse. Work was cursed as a result of the fall. But the commandment that most people think of, the Sabbath commandment, is a work commandment. 6 days shalt thou work, and then the seventh you rest. And so the things we've talked about today and last week in terms of whether you make money on it or you don't make money or you think you'll make money and it didn't turn into a good business or whatever it is, it's all about work, godly work, and we should celebrate work. It's not like, oh, thank God it's Friday and I don't have to work. Thank God for today that I get an opportunity to serve the kingdom. And then on that day of rest, thank God for the rest.
Yes. Amen. Amen.
Okay.
Well, I think we're getting to the end of our time, like you said, but it's always a pleasure. And is that it? Do you have any other closing thoughts before we sign off for today?
No, God answered my prayer of no trains coming in because I was afraid that if I muted you, I might evaporate like has happened on occasion. So I'm glad that didn't happen. I'm glad I didn't evaporate. And we'll see you all next week. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you.